I have a feeling that this is going to be the closest we come to a Lestrade-focused episode, so I'll take it. But with that said, hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another one of our weekly Moriarty the Patriot discussion videos. Today we're here to talk all about episode 17, The Riot in the New Scotland Yard. But before we get into the video proper, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet, to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AnyTube know that you're here. Let's go ahead and set our like goal for this week at 100 likes. If we can hit 100 likes by the end of the day, I will feel accomplished. So let's go ahead and try 100 likes before the end of the day. With that said though, let's go ahead and jump into this week's episode of Moriarty the Patriot, shall we? Let's go ahead, we shall. So, as I said, I feel like this is going to be one of the only times we get a Lestrade-centric episode. Lestrade as a character has always been very much like a background player in a lot of Holmes stories. However, he is vital to the Holmes mythos when you think about it, right? Because without Lestrade, you don't really have an in with the police, which means, you know, Sherlock wouldn't exactly be getting a lot of the cases that he gets, right? Most people, like, show up to meet Holmes as the consulting detective after he gets a lot of big breaks with Lestrade, and Lestrade continues to rely on him for a lot of the bigger mysteries that Sherlock faces. So without Lestrade, you wouldn't really have much of a lot of good cases that Sherlock ends up going on. So I feel like Lestrade deserves a lot more screen time than he gets in Moriarty the Patriot. I've seen, like, the best example of Lestrade, I'd say, is probably BBC Sherlock. They give Lestrade a lot to do, but even then, not really. So I appreciate that, like, Moriarty the Patriot is like, okay, we're not really focusing on Lestrade, since we're also not really focusing on Sherlock. It's more about the Moriarty side of things. But we should at least give Lestrade his due. He's a very vital member of this mythos, so he deserves to have at least a little bit of a centric, or a character-centric episode. Which, like, it's not, it's also about Bond. But, you know, I like Bond, so I'm not going to say no. It's about Bond, Patterson, and Lestrade. It's not just Lestrade, but Lestrade is the catalyst. So, you know what? Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, I will take it. And I think it's important to note that Lestrade is a detective, right? Like, he's not, like, amazing at it. He is an inspector, right? He inspects, right? And he is clever. He immediately can tell that something's going on, and that there's some sort of fraud, right? There's, like, that this man is being framed for the Jack the Ripper thing when in actuality that never happened. And that his chief inspector is obviously, like, distorting and abusing the law, like, to his own benefit, to make sure that the yard still seems intelligent and strong and that he doesn't lose his job. So he's framing this innocent man, and we see that dude later, like, beating the hell out of the supposed victim, or the supposed Jack the Ripper, when in actuality it was just, you know, some guy. So he's trying to coerce this guy into giving a false testimony, or rather a false confession. And Lestrade obviously wants to have none of that. And I loved the depiction of Lestrade this week. I think Fuminori Komatsu absolutely nails the Seiyu role for Lestrade. I only really know Komatsu for one other thing, but it's big. And that is Polnareff from JoJo's. That's mainly how I know Komatsu. So I was like, hell yeah, it's Polnareff. Of course Polnareff is all about justice. And so is Lestrade. So I appreciated seeing Lestrade kind of show off that he's as committed to justice as Sherlock is, right? He's an inspector, he cares, but he's not like a corrupt cop in the way that, say, like, the chief is, right? Like, he's not using the system to abuse it. He actually wants to uphold it. And even to an extent, Patterson's a corrupt cop, right? Like, he's on the side of Moriarty and the gang, so ultimately he's willing to bend the rules. He's willing to work in this sort of gray area in order to achieve a better tomorrow. Whereas Lestrade, he's very much black and white, like, clear cut. He's gonna uphold justice, and that's his job. Not gonna associate with the Moriartys, right? Like, Lestrade is just, nope, I am justice. I am justice, and I will seek justice. And we see that when he lashes out against his boss. Like, that's a huge moment for him, because it shows his willingness to actually, I don't say break the rules, but his willingness to stand in in defiance of corruption, right? Like, it's a very, like, Steve Rogers moment where it's like, even though I represent this thing, I'm not going to let the bad things that this system does go by, right? Captain America, Steve Rogers, obviously represents America, but he's also not going to just kowtow to what the American government tells him to do. And same thing with Lestrade. Even though he is part of Scotland Yard, he upholds the ideals of Scotland Yard. He is not going to willingly go about with any sort of corruption that happens within the Yard. He wants to uphold the ideal, right? Again, sort of like another character, kind of like Kiryu from Yakuza. Like, he wants to uphold this idealized version of the organization in which he is representing. So I really liked the way that they handled Lestrade. And again, Komatsu was absolutely brilliant. The direction, as usual, Nomura knocking it out of the park. So yeah, I think that they absolutely handled Lestrade really well. And I like that we get some whoomp with Lestrade. You guys know, I like me some whoomp. I don't know why. When characters get beat up, I just think they look better. So Lestrade having like a bit of a roughed up appearance, I was like, nice, right? So I was like, cool. Lestrade looks like a badass. I dig it. He's kind of hot, so I'm into it. But it's funny too, because afterwards we get this scene between him and Patterson where we hear him relinquish the role of Chief Inspector to Patterson, even though everybody wanted it to be Lestrade. Which even I was surprised about, because I assumed it was going to be Lestrade, but instead it's Patterson, which makes a lot more sense, because now it seems like the whole thing was all according to Keikaku, all according to William's plan, because now they have one of their guys as the Chief Inspector at the Yard. So now they can do a lot more things with a lot less concern about what the Yard is going to do. So I think that that's definitely all according to Keikaku. But again, as I said, Lestrade is clever enough to notice that there was something amiss, but not clever enough to notice all the people pulling the strings in the background. Lestrade did not notice that the Moriartys were behind everything. Lestrade did not notice that Patterson was actually kind of corrupt. Lestrade did not notice Bond being there, who we'll get to in a second, nor does Lestrade really understand Sherlock's motives, I guess. Like, Lestrade still doesn't really have a handle on who Sherlock is. You know, he's trying to figure him out. Sherlock to us in general is a mystery, so I can only imagine how Greg must be feeling. But yeah, I think that they handled Lestrade especially well this week, and I had to give them some kudos. They nailed it. I think they did it exceptionally well with my boy. And again, probably the only time we will get a Lestrade-focused episode. Maybe not. Maybe we'll get something with him eventually. I'm still sort of burned that, according to manga fans, we have skipped the Hounds of Baskerville. I wonder if we can maybe work it in, because that's such an iconic case. And Lestrade is kind of involved in it, so I would like to see that. Because again, Lestrade brings Sherlock all his friggin' dope cases, so I hope that we actually get to see some of that. Especially since Lestrade wants to be he wants boots on the ground, right? He doesn't want to be behind the desk. He wants to be out there with Sherlock. So I feel like at some point we need to get another Lestrade-focused episode. I hope, anyway. But if it's just this one was pretty dope. However, that's not the only character that we want to talk about this week. I definitely have to take a minute to single out Bond. Bond is the friggin' best. I love Bond. I think they're the coolest. His meetup with Herder, I think is really grand, especially knowing now, because people have told me, like, so unfortunately the rights to Bond is very tricky. Like, Sherlock is thankfully open source, so like anybody can use Sherlock Holmes to tell their stories. He is in the public domain, which is great. I think more things should be in the public domain, if I'm honest. But that's a story for a whole other day. But yeah, they can use Sherlock and stuff, but using Bond, it's a little bit more tricky. You'll notice that Bond has like an E at the end of his name. So James Bond. I'm surprised nobody has made a James Blonde comment yet, because when Daniel Craig became Bond, that's all any of us could make jokes about. Sorry, Daniel. But yeah, so it's interesting to me that Bond has their own Q already, right? And also Moran is sort of their like other agent in the field, right? Their superior agent. But it's cool. I like that Herder is basically our Q and makes all the gadgets. Like, we actually get a scene where Bond is going over their friggin' gadgets, and it's great, right? Honestly, Bond in this series reminds me a lot of Sherlock Sholmes from Arsène Lupin, in the sense that, like, it's Bond, but we had to sort of flub a lot of the names so that we don't get in trouble. Because back then, Sherlock Holmes was still technically copywritten to Doyle, so you can't actually use it. So it had to be Herlock Sholmes. It's exactly just Sherlock in the Arsène Lupin canon, but it was Herlock Sholmes instead. Now, if Arsène was being written today, they could just use Sherlock Holmes. But now we get two versions of Sherlock, one of which is more fabulous, and believe it or not, it's actually Herlock. You should check out Code Realize. But that's the second time I've mentioned Herlock in two separate videos. I might have Herlock on the brain. But Bond getting to talk to Q about the gadgets, I think that was great. The big thing for me, and I'm likely using this as the picture because I thought it was great, is that Bond gets the Aston Martin, essentially. It's not the Aston Martin, but it's the automobile, right? Now, the big thing you might know about Bond, if you know anything, it's that Bond has cool gadgets, Bond drives cool cars, and Bond, hooks up with hot women, which Bond could totally do. Like, this Bond could 100% still do. Bond can do a lot of things in the Bond series, and here we're starting to see elements of it. Obviously, certain things that this Bond can't do that the other Bond can, which is drive an Aston Martin, because they don't exist yet. So unfortunately, we get this like big crazy contraption. Right now, the automobile was being crafted at around this time, so we get Herder's version of the automobile, and it looks kind of goofy, but that's what they look like. And I was kind of just happy to see it. And Bond looks friggin' cool, like with the goggles and the big smile driving the thing, and everybody like turning like, what is this contraption? And they have this sort of cheeky kinship with Patterson, where Patterson says like, you are drawing a dreadful amount of attention to yourself. And, Bond's just like, well, whatever. Like, Bond's like, nonsense. And Bond even makes a drink named after Patterson. And funny enough, how do you make the drink? Well, you add in a couple dashes of this, a little bit of this, and it is shaken, not stirred. Because of course it is. Of course Bond says, like, if I could get that shaken, and then you add two drops of whatever. I'm like, oh, shaken, eh? And we see the barkeep shake the glass, not stir the glass. And I'm like, very clever. Very clever, Kazuya Nomura. Very, very clever. Can't say shaken, not stirred, so let's just show it. I loved it. I thought that was very, very clever. It's a very fun nod. If you don't know, shaken, not stirred is a Bond quote. Super cool. They let you know that they love Bond by showing off the gadgets, like Bond actually using the smoke or the gas bullets on the wall to knock out those detectives. Then Patterson gets them a suit. They use the suit. They sneak in. Again, Bond is also a master of disguise, so it's cool. Everything with Bond this week was just great. I think one of the most surprising things with Bond this week is we sort of get a Bond-Sherlock reunion for like a half second. When Lestrade is fighting with the former Chief Inspector, which is a great scene, again, like I said. But Bond pretends like to run off and get help, and they run past Sherlock. And there's like, time slows down. They don't look at each other, but time slows down when he passes. And it's not like Sherlock knows that Bond is the artist formerly known as Irene Adler. But at least I don't think that's the case. But Bond kind of Sherlock gets the hint that after Bond runs, that it's like, okay, we're good, we can leave. Lestrade will be fine. And Watson's like, wait, what? Like, because Watson's not aware, right? So Watson's like, what? Huh? What? But Sherlock's like, no, it's fine. Trust me, it's all going to work out now. I know what's going on. So Sherlock, to some degree, knew that this particular cop, that this particular Bobby, was clearly working with Moriarty. That's why they were the first out, to some degree. I don't know if he necessarily recognizes Bond as, like, the person who was like, good night, Mr. Holmes. Like, I don't know if Sherlock necessarily recalls that, and that's why he knew, or if he just had a good feeling. Either way, it was cool. I'm really looking forward to the eventual reunion between Bond and Sherlock. Or I guess the first meeting between Bond and Sherlock's? I don't know. Because it is Irene. I don't know. Like, the first meeting, I guess, between Bond and Sherlock, but the reunion of sorts between Irene and Sherlock. This is where it gets complicated. But yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts on this week's episode, everybody. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot, share if you care, leave a comment down below, and of course, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AniTube know that you're here. And before we go, as always, I want to give a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. Look at these beautiful people. Look at all these beautiful names, and hey, if you'd like to join these beautiful people, there are 2 ways to do so. The first is by hitting that join button right beside the sub button, and the second is by hitting that Patreon link in the description. For just a single $1. You can see your name scrolling past the screen here, so if that sounds cool to you, go ahead and hit that join button or check out the Patreon link. Either way, super appreciated. So once again, a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. I just realized that I didn't talk about the fact that the Moriarty plan is going into action soon, or the fact that Mycroft and Albert have quite the conversation. Totally forgot to mention that. So here it is now. Both of those have me hyped. Mycroft and Albert hanging out is cool. The Moriarty plan going into action is also going to be cool. Yes. Okay, bye.